I checked my reflection in the tinted glass of the car door for what felt like the 10th time. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, no matter how tightly I pressed them against my dress. It wasn't even a new dress, just one I had carefully altered myself to make it look more elegant. Navy blue, simple, modest. Appropriate, I had thought. Pull yourself together, Elizabeth, I whispered under my breath. Today wasn't about me. It was my daughter's wedding. I reached up and touched the thin silver chain around my neck. It had taken me 2 months to save for it. Not because it was expensive, because I had been sending nearly every extra dollar somewhere else. Toward this day. Toward her happiness. Inside my small clutch was a letter. I had rewritten it at least 15 times. Along with it, a check, the remainder of my savings. My future, folded neatly into an envelope. I stepped out of the car. The venue rose before me like something out of a magazine. Tall windows, polished stone, white flowers everywhere. It wasn't the kind of place I would ever choose. But then again, this day had never been about what I would choose. A young woman with a headset hurried toward me. Mrs. Carter? You made it. I smiled politely. Of course. She looked slightly flustered. We were just finalizing some last-minute arrangements. The catering team had a few questions about the service you arranged. That word, you, sent a quiet wave of pride through me. I'll speak with them, I said. Inside, the ballroom shimmered. Crystal lights, perfectly arranged tables, soft music floating through the air. It was beautiful, exactly what she had always dreamed of. And I had made it happen. Months of overtime shifts, skipping meals, selling things I never thought I'd part with. All for this moment. Mom. Her voice cut through everything. I turned. Emily stood a few steps away, glowing in her wedding dress. For a moment, I forgot everything else. She was still my little girl. You look, I swallowed. You look incredible. I stepped forward to hug her. She let me, but only briefly. A quick, stiff embrace. Then she pulled away. Her eyes scanned me. You're wearing that? The words landed softly, but they hit hard. I forced a small smile. I thought it was appropriate. She hesitated. It's fine. Fine. She turned slightly toward the coordinator. Did you explain the seating? The woman glanced at me awkwardly. Not yet. Emily sighed, clearly irritated. Mom, we had to make some changes. I nodded immediately. Of course. What kind of changes? Some of Daniel's family confirmed last minute. Important people. I felt that word settle in my chest. Okay, I said gently. So where should I sit? She hesitated just a fraction too long. Then the coordinator handed me a small card. I looked down. Table 27. Something about the number felt off. Where is that? I asked. Emily crossed her arms slightly. It's near the back. I glanced around the room. Then I saw it. A small table tucked near a side door. Not part of the main layout. Half hidden. Close to where the staff moved in and out. There? I asked quietly. Yes, she said a little too quickly. It's not a big deal. I kept looking at it. There were no decorations on that table yet. Just extra glasses. A folded linen. It looked temporary. That's near the service entrance, I said. Her expression tightened. Mom, please don't start. I'm not starting anything, I said softly. You always do this, she cut in. You make everything about you. The words hit harder than I expected. I'm not. Daniel's parents have guests that matter, she continued. We can't just move people around for your comfort. Comfort. I let out a small breath. I didn't ask for comfort, I said. I just thought. You thought you'd be front and center? She snapped. This isn't your day. Daniel appeared beside her then. Everything okay? Emily didn't miss a beat. She's upset about the seating. I'm not upset, I said quickly. Just surprised. She thinks she's too good for the table, Emily added. Daniel looked uncomfortable. I'm sure it's fine, he said. I nodded, forcing a calm smile. It is. Good, Emily said sharply. Then, lowering her voice, please don't embarrass me today. The room felt colder. I wouldn't do that, I said. She leaned closer. You already are. Then she stepped back, slipping her arm through Daniel's. As they walked away, I heard her whisper, I told you she'd do this. I stood there, holding the card. Table 27. For a moment, everything blurred. Years of memories rose up all at once. Late nights, double shifts, empty refrigerators, saying, maybe next time, when she wanted something I couldn't afford. And still, somehow, I had made this day happen. I picked up a glass of champagne from a passing tray. Then another. I walked slowly toward the restroom. Inside, I locked myself in a stall. I didn't sob. I didn't break down. Just 3 quiet tears. No more. When I came out, my face was calm again. Composed. Controlled. I looked at myself in the mirror. Okay, I whispered. Then I turned, and instead of heading back to the ballroom, I walked in the opposite direction. Toward the event office. The manager looked up when I entered. Mrs. Carter, how can I help you? I smiled. I need to make a change to tonight's arrangements. I had always believed that love meant giving without counting. That if you kept showing up, kept sacrificing, kept choosing someone over yourself again and again, eventually they would understand. Eventually they would see you. Standing there in that quiet office, pen in hand, I realized how wrong I had been. Not all at once, not in some dramatic revelation, but slowly, like a truth that had been waiting for years finally, deciding it was done being ignored. The manager was still speaking, explaining cancellation policies, percentages, timelines, but his words sounded distant, like they were echoing down a long hallway. I nodded at the right moments, signed where he pointed, and when it was done, I felt something unexpected, not regret, not anger, but a strange, unsettling calm. As if I had just stepped off a path I had been walking for decades without ever questioning where it led. When I walked back into the ballroom, nothing had changed, at least not yet. Guests were still arriving, laughter floated through the air, glasses clinked, and everything looked exactly as it was supposed to. Perfect. Controlled. Beautiful. I returned to table 27, my assigned place, and sat down quietly, folding my hands in my lap as if I belonged there. No one stopped me. No one questioned it. And that, somehow, hurt more than anything Emily had said. It meant this distance, this quiet exclusion, fit the story she had built well enough that no one thought twice about it. I watched her across the room, surrounded by people who seemed to belong in a way I never had. She moved effortlessly among them, smiling, laughing, touching arms, leaning in just the right way when she spoke. I barely recognized her, not because she had changed overnight, but because I was finally seeing clearly what had been there all along. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when Emily would run to me the moment I walked through the door, no matter how late it was or how tired I looked. She didn't care about my uniform, about the smell of antiseptic that clung to my skin, about the exhaustion I tried to hide behind a smile. To her, I was everything. I remember one night in particular, when she was 8 years old, curled up on the couch waiting for me after a long shift. She had fallen asleep with a crayon still in her hand, a drawing half finished on the paper beside her. When I picked it up, I saw the two of us, stick figures, holding hands, under a crooked sun. Best mom ever, she had written in uneven letters across the top. I kept that drawing for years, tucked away in a box I couldn't bring myself to open anymore. Things began to change slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Around the time she turned 13, she started noticing differences, things I had always known were there but hoped she wouldn't feel so sharply. Her friends had bigger houses, newer clothes, vacations that sounded like stories from another world. I tried to make up for it in the only ways I could, working more hours, taking extra shifts, stretching every dollar until it nearly broke, but no matter how much I gave, It was never the same kind of giving she saw around her. One evening, she sat at the kitchen table, barely touching her dinner, and said, "Do you think we'll ever live somewhere nicer?" I remember pausing, choosing my words carefully, wanting to give her hope without making promises I couldn't keep. "We have a home," I told her gently, "and we have each other. That matters more." She didn't argue. She just nodded, but something in her expression changed, something quiet and distant that I didn't fully understand at the time. By the time she started high school, the gap between us had widened into something harder to ignore. She began editing parts of her life when she spoke to others, small things at first, then bigger ones. My job became something vague, something less specific. Our apartment became temporary. Our struggles became invisible. I told myself it was just a phase, that teenagers often tried to reshape themselves to fit in, that she would grow out of it. So, I let it happen. I didn't correct her. I didn't challenge her. I made myself smaller in her stories because I thought it would make her life easier. Looking back now, I see that every time I stayed silent, I was teaching her that I was something to be hidden. College only deepened the divide. She reinvented herself completely, building a version of her life that didn't include the parts she didn't like, the parts that included me. I sent money whenever she needed it, even when I didn't really have it to send. I worked nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it took. When she called, it was usually quick, distracted, filled with details about people I had never met and places I had never seen. I listened anyway, holding on to those brief conversations as if they were enough. When she told me about Daniel, I wanted to believe things would change, that maybe this new chapter would bring us closer again. Instead, it only made the distance more official. Meeting his family had been an experience. They were polite, perfectly so, but there was a kind of careful distance in their kindness, as if they were evaluating something they couldn't quite name. Emily had prepared me beforehand, what to say, what not to say, how to present myself. I followed every instruction, not because I agreed with them, but because I thought it mattered to her. I thought if I played my part well enough, she might look at me with pride instead of quiet discomfort. Now, sitting at that small table near the service door, I realized how little any of that had mattered. The room grew fuller as the ceremony ended, and guests began taking their seats. I watched as people found their places, greeted each other, settled into conversations that flowed easily and naturally. My table remained mostly empty, aside from a distant relative of Daniel's who sat down briefly, checked his phone, and then left to join another group. I didn't mind being alone. In a strange way, it gave me space to think, to finally look at everything without rushing to fix it, without trying to make it better. Across the room, Emily laughed again, her head tilted back slightly, her hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm. For a moment, our eyes met. Just a second. Then she looked away, as if acknowledging me might disrupt the image she had worked so hard to create. That was when something inside me settled completely, not broke, not shattered, just settled. A quiet understanding that I could no longer keep pretending this didn't hurt, that I could no longer keep accepting a role I had never chosen. I glanced at my watch. Not long now. Soon, the absence would be noticed. Not immediately. At first, there would be confusion, small delays, questions asked in low voices. Then realization. Then consequences. I didn't know exactly how it would unfold, but I knew one thing for certain. For the first time, I wasn't going to step in and fix it. I wasn't going to absorb the discomfort, smooth things over, make excuses. I had done that my entire life. Tonight, things would be different. I picked up my glass of water and took a slow sip, my hand steady now. Around me, the room buzzed with anticipation, with expectation, with the certainty that everything would go exactly as planned. And for the first time in a very long time, I allowed myself to sit still in the middle of it all and do nothing at all. No fixing, no apologizing, no shrinking. Just waiting. I knew the exact moment everything began to unravel, even before anyone else noticed it. It wasn't loud or dramatic at first. No sudden announcement, no visible chaos. Just a subtle shift in the rhythm of the room, like music skipping for half a second. The staff near the service entrance started moving differently, exchanging glances, speaking in hushed tones that carried just enough tension to catch my attention. I sat still at table 27, watching it all unfold with a calm I didn't recognize in myself. For years, I had been the one anticipating problems before they happened, stepping in before anything could go wrong, making sure Emily's world stayed smooth and intact. Now I was doing the opposite. I was watching, waiting, allowing. The guests, of course, noticed nothing at first. They were busy enjoying themselves, laughing, taking photos, sipping wine, complimenting the decor. The illusion was still holding. Emily and Daniel made their way to the center of the room, greeted by applause as they took their places at the head table. She looked radiant, perfectly composed, every movement rehearsed and effortless. If anyone had looked closely, they might have seen the faint tension in her shoulders, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she wasn't directly facing someone. But no one was looking that closely. No one ever does when everything appears perfect. I checked my watch again. The dinner service should have started by now. Near the back, the coordinator was no longer walking. She was moving quickly, almost running, her headset pressed tightly against her ear as she spoke in clipped, urgent sentences. Another staff member joined her, then another. The cluster near the kitchen grew, their confusion becoming harder to hide. A few guests began to notice, their conversations slowing as they glanced toward the service doors, sensing that something wasn't quite right. Still, no one said anything out loud. Not yet. Then the DJ's voice filled the room, smooth and practiced. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please take your seats, dinner will be served shortly. A ripple of movement followed as guests settled in, chairs sliding softly across the floor, conversations pausing in anticipation. I remained where I was, hands folded neatly in front of me, my gaze steady. Across the room, I saw Emily lean slightly toward Daniel, whispering something to him. He frowned, then looked toward the coordinator. Within seconds, she was at their table, bending down, speaking quickly. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly what she was saying. Emily's expression changed. At first, just confusion, then irritation, then something sharper, something closer to alarm. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, and followed the coordinator toward the kitchen. Daniel hesitated for a moment before getting up and going after her. A murmur began to spread through the room, quiet but growing, like the first drops of rain before a storm. Guests shifted in their seats, glancing at one another, checking their watches, taking small sips of wine as they waited. The bread baskets were placed on tables, a temporary distraction, but even that only delayed the inevitable. Minutes passed. Too many. Finally, the venue manager stepped up to the microphone. His smile was tight, his voice carefully controlled. Good evening, everyone. We do apologize for the slight delay. We are currently addressing a small issue with the dinner service. Please enjoy your drinks and we will begin shortly. A small issue. I almost smiled. Across the room, I saw Emily reappear from the kitchen. Her face had lost all color. She looked around, searching, scanning the crowd until her eyes found me. The moment our gazes locked, I saw it, the understanding, sharp and sudden, cutting through everything else. She knew. For a second, she didn't move. Then she started walking toward me. Not quickly. Not yet. But with a purpose that made people instinctively step aside as she passed. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The room seemed to sense that something important, something uncomfortable, was about to happen. Did you do this? Her voice wasn't loud, but in the quiet that had fallen over the room, it didn't need to be. I didn't look away. Yes, I said. The word landed heavily, echoing in the silence. You canceled the catering? She demanded, her voice rising now, disbelief giving way to anger. I did. For a moment, she just stared at me, as if waiting for me to laugh, to admit it was a misunderstanding, to fix it the way I always had before. When I didn't, something inside her snapped. "How could you?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stood slowly, meeting her at eye level. "The same thing you did," I replied calmly. "I made a decision." Her hands clenched at her sides. "This is my wedding. And I paid for it," I said, my voice steady. The words seemed to ripple outward, reaching the people closest to us first, then spreading through the room as whispers. Daniel had caught up by then, his expression tense, confused. "What's going on?" he asked. "She canceled the food," Emily said, her voice shaking. "She ruined everything."
Daniel looked at me.
"Is that true?" "Yes."
"Why?"
The question hung between us. I could have answered simply. I could have softened it, made it easier to accept. But I was done making things easier. "Because you seated me at a table by the service door," I said. "Because you spoke to me like I was something to be tolerated, not respected. Because after everything I've done, everything I've given, I was still an embarrassment to you." Emily's face flushed deep red. "That's not the same thing."
"No."
I tilted my head slightly. It felt the same to me. "This is sabotage," she snapped. "You're jealous, that's what this is. You couldn't stand seeing me happy." The accusation didn't sting the way it once would have. "I was happy for you," I said quietly, "until you made it clear there was no place for me in your happiness." Daniel looked between us, his expression shifting as pieces began to fall into place. "Wait," he said slowly. "You paid for all of this?" Emily froze. "It's not," she started. "Yes," I said. "I did." He turned to her. "You told me you covered most of it." "I was going to," she began, but her voice faltered. "With what?" I asked gently. "Your salary? Your savings?" She didn't answer. The silence was louder than anything she could have said. Around us, the room had gone completely still. No music.
No conversation.
Just the weight of truth settling over everything she had tried to build. Daniel stepped back slightly, looking at her in a way he hadn't before, not with admiration, not with affection, but with something more cautious, more distant. "You lied to me," he said. "It wasn't like that," she insisted, her voice breaking. "You lied," he repeated. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. Only clarity. I turned slightly toward the manager, who stood nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene. "Is there anything available to replace the catering?" I asked. He blinked, caught off guard. "We could arrange something simple, delivery perhaps, but it would take time." "That's fine," I said. "Order whatever you can. Something easy." Emily stared at me, disbelief written across her face. "You think that fixes this?" "No," I said. "Nothing fixes this." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out the envelope I had brought with me, and placed it gently on the table in front of her. "I wrote you a letter," I said. "But I don't think you're ready to read it yet." Her hands hovered over it, but she didn't touch it. I took a step back. "I hope someday you understand," I added softly. "This wasn't about ruining your day. It was about finally refusing to disappear from it." Then I turned. And I walked away. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just decisively. Behind me, the room remained frozen in that fragile, uncomfortable silence, the kind that only comes when something real breaks through a carefully constructed illusion. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. The night air felt colder than it should have, or maybe it was just me finally feeling something I had been holding back for years. As I stepped outside the venue, the noise from inside dulled into a distant murmur, like a world I no longer quite belonged to. For a moment, I stood there without moving, my hand still resting on the car door, my reflection faintly visible in the glass. I looked the same as I had an hour ago. Same dress, same hair, same face, but something fundamental had shifted. Not broken, not destroyed, just realigned. I got into the car and closed the door, letting the silence settle around me. My hands trembled slightly as I placed them on the steering wheel, but it wasn't the same kind of trembling from earlier. Before, it had been fear of doing the wrong thing, of disappointing, of stepping out of line. Now it was something else entirely. Release, maybe. Or the unfamiliar weight of finally choosing myself. I hadn't started the engine yet when headlights swept across the windshield, and a figure appeared in front of the car. For a brief second, I thought about driving away anyway. But I didn't. Daniel. He approached quickly, still in his tuxedo, his composure noticeably gone. When I rolled down the window, I saw it clearly. He wasn't angry in the way I expected. He looked shaken. "Mrs. Carter," he said, slightly out of breath. "Please, can we talk for a minute?" I studied him for a second before answering. "You should be inside. I needed to speak with you first." There was something sincere in his voice, something unpolished and uncertain that hadn't been there earlier in the day. "All right," I said quietly. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing back at the glowing building behind him before focusing on me again. "I didn't know," he said, "about any of it. The money, the way she's been treating you. I didn't know." I believed him. "That doesn't surprise me," I replied. He exhaled slowly. "She told me you preferred to stay out of things, that you didn't like attention, that you were distant." I let out a small, humorless breath. "Is that what she called it?" He looked down briefly, clearly uncomfortable. I should have asked more questions. "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The night stretched between us, quiet and heavy. "My parents are inside," he continued. "They're not upset about the food. Not really. They're upset about something else." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "They think what she did, how she treated you, it says more about her than anything that happened tonight." That caught me off guard. "I didn't expect that," I admitted. He gave a faint, tired smile. "My mother didn't grow up the way you think. She worked her way through everything. My father met her when she was waitressing. They've always believed that where you come from matters less than how you treat people." The irony settled between us, without needing to be spoken aloud. "She was trying so hard to impress them," I said softly. "I know," he replied. "That's the part that hurts the most. She didn't need to." We stood there. Well, he stood, and I sat, on opposite sides of a moment that neither of us had expected to share. "What are you going to do?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just found out that the person I married isn't who I thought she was." I nodded slowly. "That's not an easy thing to process." He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time without the filter Emily had placed over everything. "I don't blame you," he said. I blinked, slightly surprised. "You don't?" He shook his head.
No.
I think you reached a point where you couldn't keep accepting it anymore." That simple understanding hit deeper than I expected. "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what happened." He stepped back slightly, giving a small nod. "I just wish it hadn't come to this." "So do I replied. He hesitated, then added, "I think tonight showed me something I needed to see." "And what's that?" "That truth doesn't stay hidden forever, no matter how much you try to manage it." I held his gaze for a moment, then gave a small nod. "No, it doesn't." He stepped away then, slowly, as if unsure whether to say anything else. In the end, he didn't. He just turned and walked back toward the venue, toward the consequences waiting for him inside. I watched him go for a second, then finally started the engine. The drive home was quiet. No music.
No distractions.
Just the steady hum of the road beneath me and my thoughts settling into something clearer than they had been in years. I expected to feel guilt, regret, maybe even panic, but none of those came. Instead, there was a strange kind of stillness, like the aftermath of a storm that had been building for far too long. When I got home, everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning. The same small living room, the same worn furniture, the same quiet space I had spent years rushing through without really seeing. But tonight it felt different. Not smaller, not lacking, just mine. I kicked off my shoes, set my purse down, and walked slowly to the bathroom. As I wiped away my makeup, I studied my reflection carefully. The lines were still there, the tiredness too. But there's something else now, something steadier, stronger. A version of myself I hadn't allowed to exist before.
My phone rang.
I didn't need to look to know who it was. I let it ring, then again, and again. On the fourth call, I answered. How could you? Emily's voice came through immediately, raw and sharp, somewhere between anger and something more fragile. I closed my eyes briefly. Hello to you too. You humiliated me, she said. In front of everyone. Do you have any idea what people are saying? Yes, I replied calmly. I imagine they're talking about what happened. You ruined my wedding, she shouted. No, I said quietly. Your choices did that. There was a pause, heavy and charged. You're unbelievable, she said. All because of a table? You destroyed everything over a table? It wasn't about the table, I said. It was about what that table represented. Oh, please, she snapped. You've always been like this, dramatic, making everything bigger than it is. I almost smiled. No, I said. I've actually spent years doing the opposite. She ignored that. Daniel won't even talk to me, she continued. His parents are questioning everything. Do you understand what you've done to my life? I took a slow breath before answering. I understand that for the first time, you're facing the consequences of your actions. That's not fair. It's accurate. Silence fell again, but this time it felt different. Less explosive. More uncertain. You've always been jealous, she said finally, her voice quieter but still sharp. That I wanted more than what you had. That I didn't want your life. That one landed, but not the way she expected. I never wanted you to have my life, I said gently. I wanted you to build your own. Just not by pretending I didn't exist. She didn't respond immediately. And I was never jealous of you, I added. I was proud of you, even when you were ashamed of me. The silence stretched longer this time. Then, softer than before, she said, You didn't have to do this. Yes, I replied. I did.
Why?
The question was different now. Not defensive. Not accusatory. Just confused. Because I couldn't keep disappearing for you, I said. Not anymore. I heard her breathing on the other end of the line, uneven, unsteady. I don't even know what happens now, she admitted. Neither do I said. But whatever happens, it needs to be real.
She didn't argue.
For the first time in a very long time, she didn't try to twist the conversation, didn't push, didn't defend. She just listened. And then the line went quiet. The days after the wedding didn't explode the way I once would have expected. There was no dramatic fallout, no immediate closure, no clear resolution. Instead, everything settled into something quieter, heavier, like dust slowly falling after something has been shaken loose. For the first time in years, my life wasn't organized around Emily's needs, her expectations, her version of what things should look like. And that absence was both freeing and unsettling. I woke up the next morning out of habit before my alarm, my body still wired to a routine built on exhaustion and urgency, but there was nowhere I needed to rush to, no problem waiting for me to solve. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, realizing how unfamiliar that feeling was, stillness without guilt. At work, people had already started talking. News travels fast in places like hospitals, carried in half-finished conversations and knowing glances exchanged over coffee. I caught fragments of it throughout the day. Wedding, canceled, mother, unbelievable, but no one approached me directly at first. They didn't need to. I could see the curiosity in their eyes, the silent questions they weren't sure how to ask. By the end of my shift, One of the younger nurses finally sat beside me in the break room, hesitating before speaking. "Is it true?" she asked gently. I met her gaze and nodded. She waited for more, for an explanation or a justification, but I didn't give one. After a moment, she simply said, "You must have had a reason." And that was enough. For once, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. The biggest change wasn't in how others saw me. It was in how I moved through my own life. I stopped volunteering for extra shifts without thinking. I stopped saying yes automatically. I stopped measuring my worth by how much I could give away. It felt unnatural at first, almost selfish, like I was breaking some unspoken rule I had followed for decades. But with each small decision, to rest, to leave work on time, to spend money on something that wasn't strictly necessary, that feeling shifted. Not into guilt, but into something steadier.
Balance, maybe.
Or respect. For myself, Emily didn't call for 3 days. I thought about reaching out more times than I want to admit. My instinct was still there, deeply ingrained. The need to fix, to comfort, to close the distance before it grew too wide. But every time I picked up my phone, I stopped myself. This time, it couldn't be me bridging the gap alone. This time, if there was going to be a conversation, it had to come from her. On the 4th day, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I didn't recognize her at first. Emily stood there, but not the version I had seen at the wedding. Her hair was pulled back simply, no careful styling, no effort to impress. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, her face bare of makeup, her eyes tired in a way I had never seen before. For a moment, we just looked at each other, both unsure of what to say. "Hi," she said quietly. Neither of us moved. "I wasn't sure if you'd open the door," she admitted. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," I replied. That seemed to settle something between us. Not fix it, but shift it. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, looking around as if seeing the space for the first time, even though she had grown up here. Maybe she was. Maybe we both were. We sat across from each other, the same way we had countless times before, but it felt different now. There was no script, no familiar pattern to fall into. "I don't know where to start," she said. "Then don't start with a speech," I replied gently. "Just be honest." She let out a shaky breath, nodding slightly. "Everything fell apart," she said. "Not just the wedding. Everything." I waited. "Daniel left," she continued. "Not immediately, but he said he needs time. His parents are furious, not about the food, like you said. About me." She swallowed. "About who I turned out to be." "That must be hard," I said. "It is," she admitted. "But that's not the worst part." I didn't interrupt. "The worst part is realizing they're right." That was the first moment I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. "I spent years pretending," she went on. "Changing things, hiding things, reshaping everything so it looked better, sounded better. I thought if I could just build the right version of my life, everything would feel right." She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "It didn't." "No," I said quietly. "It usually doesn't." She looked at me then, really looked at me, without defensiveness, without distance. "I was ashamed of you," she said. "And I hate that. I hate that I ever felt that way, and I hate even more that I acted on it." The words still hurt, but they didn't cut as deeply as they once would have. "I know," I said. She blinked, surprised. "You do?" "I've known for a long time," I replied. "Why didn't you say anything?" I held her gaze. "Because I thought if I stayed quiet, you'd eventually stop feeling that way." She shook her head slowly. "That just made it easier for me to keep doing it." "Yes," I said. "It did." The honesty between us was uncomfortable, but it was also something we had never really had before. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said after a moment. "Good," I replied. "Because I'm not ready to do that yet." She nodded, accepting it. "But that doesn't mean we can't start figuring things out," I added. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, just a fraction. I don't know who I am without all of it, she admitted. The image, the expectations, the pretending. Then maybe this is your chance to find out, I said. She gave a small, uncertain smile. That's terrifying. It usually is, I replied. We sat in silence for a moment, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't filled with tension or avoidance. It was just space. I got a smaller apartment, she said suddenly. I sold some things. I'm looking for a new job, something I actually care about this time. I nodded. That sounds like a start. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and placed an envelope on the table between us. I can't pay you back for everything right away, she said, but I want to start. I didn't open it. Why? I asked. Because it's my responsibility, she said. Not yours. That mattered more than the money. I picked up the envelope and set it aside. One step at a time, I said. She nodded. Can we try again? She asked carefully. Not like before. Not pretending everything's fine. Just slowly. I considered the question. Not the easy answer. Not the automatic one. The real one. Yes, I said finally. But it has to be different this time. It will be, she said. We'll see, I replied. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed that we might. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the past didn't matter. But because, finally, we weren't pretending anymore. And that, more than anything, felt like the beginning of something real.